The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us this morning on some cybersecurity, taking steps to protect your business. We have a couple housekeeping items that we like to go over here early on. We've muted everyone, so we don't have any background noise. So you're free to do the things that you need to do while you're in the background. We also have a chat window that is available for you to ask a question. I am your moderator today. My name is Pete Bussum, and I will pose the question to the speaker, Rob Lamb. So we will wait, though, between slides to ask those questions, and Rob may choose to say that he's going to cover that, and he may put it in the parking lot till later in the presentation. Please interact us. There are no polls today, but we certainly like to hear questions, and you can use that chat box to give us the questions. Contact information will be provided at the end of the webinar, so you'll be able to reach out and get any other information or get questions answered that maybe you have on the topic today. And then last but not least, our link to the recording will be available. We will send it out via email, so be on the lookout after later today or tomorrow, and you should see that link via email. On that note, I'd like to introduce Doug. Doug is the account manager at LambTech. So, Doug, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Pete, and good morning, and thanks for joining us here this morning. As Pete said, that I am Doug Sokolowski, the account manager for LambTech, and we appreciate your time here today. And we're going to give you some insight as to what LambTech does here before we introduce our speaker. He'll actually be introduced twice today because he's the owner and the founder of LambTech. And of course, we were founded by Robert Lamb in 1999 here in Sedalia. Robert still serves as our owner today and will also be our guest speaker. We'll provide managed services for businesses and organizations with our core area being anywhere from the Kansas City area to Columbia, up north in the Brunswick area, down south to Springfield, but we do service several other states and regions of Missouri and the Midwest as well. Now, LambTech aligns IT solutions with your growth initiatives with our overall goal to take care of your technology so you can focus on your day-to-day business and really just getting down to the nuts and bolts of your maintenance and stop expanding your problems. We also offer managed services to maintain your security, help desk support, consulting, and also data recovery and backup services. One other note before we begin with Robert, for those of you joining us today that that are our current clients at LambTech, we do appreciate your partnership, and we do believe that you'll still learn more about protecting your business and how we assist with that. If you have questions on what you learned today and how it pertains specifically to your agreements with LambTech, feel free to reach out to our team after the webinar is complete. But by all means, also ask questions too, and I'm sure Robert will answer that. Some of you may have joined us for our webinars in the past. We appreciate your interest in learning more to improve and enhance our business strategy. Today, our goal is to discuss how cybersecurity poses an ongoing challenge for businesses and how you can better protect your network. And we thank Tech Data, who is our distribution partner of LambTech, for sponsoring our webinar today. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. He'll be discussing best practices to limit exposures to breaches and to show your staff is an important part of the process as well. And he is the owner and CEO of LambTech, Robert Lamb. Good morning, Robert.
Morning, Doug. Thanks, everyone, for taking time out to sit and listen to some ideas and thoughts that we want to share with you. As Doug said, we do have some clients online, and I want to personally thank you for joining us. Cybersecurity is one of those topics that it seems like it's prevalent in the news on a daily basis, and consequently what seems to occur is that you hear about it so much that it just becomes so mainstream that people don't really think too much about it unless and until it happens to you, some type of a breach, attack, encryption event. And then it's kind of like having a car accident and then trying to decide, well, gosh, I should have probably put new brakes on my vehicle or done something to maybe minimize that risk. So really the discussion today is going to be a lot about understanding what those risks are, what can you do to minimize those, and what are some of the new tools, processes, and things that you can do to kind of help mitigate some of those. And our job always is to help our clients and our new prospects have an awareness and a knowledge to make good decisions and be able to weigh those risks and weigh what your exposure is and try to determine what your risk tolerance is. So as we begin, I encourage you, even though this is kind of a one-way communication, as Pete pointed out, please feel free to pop in some questions. I was telling Pete this is one of my early challenges for a webinar, and one of the things that I really enjoy is public speaking, but I rely on a lot of feedback and getting questions from the audience. So feel free, if I ask some questions, please feel free to make comments, and we will keep this moving right along, so we're not going to take up a lot of your day. So I try to think of some way to get everybody's attention to see, what the Pete, can I have control over the screen? To see what we can do to maybe emphasize to everyone what the impact is on our exposure. Still, there we go. So let me back up one, and you can tell we're there we go. So this was the screen that I think tells a lot. Everybody hears about ransomware, and that's usually where a lot of the threats flow. In 2018, there was over 5 billion unique threats globally. 2019, the trend continued. But what we're seeing is a lot of changes in that. Most of these, and this isn't a change, all of this is driven by financial gain. There are people out there, we hear in the news about all of the activities with trying to influence political and socioeconomic things in other countries, in our country, but really it all boils down to money. 38% of the attacks in 2019 were actually crypto miners, which that's essentially software that's maliciously placed on unknowing users and turns their machines into going out to mine bitcoins. And it's a terrible malware. It's remotely controlled by hackers. And then you tie those in with the second item, which is a botnet. And a botnet is basically a network of those computers that are infected. Coming in, another one that a lot of people don't realize, but is starting to get a lot more attention, is the mobile hacking that's going on. The Google Android devices are under a lot of scrutiny right now because their network is a little bit more lax in being able to protect and vet the software that's being downloaded. So even though a lot of people complain about Apple and iOS and how stringent they are on their store, it's a pretty good demonstration as why you see more Android attacks than you do on Apple. It's not to say they're not there. These programmers are pretty crafty at their trade when it comes to secretly mining data from your phones. Next, of course, is banking. Another one is InfoStealer, which InfoStealer is kind of a new a description, but basically it's software that sits and resides on a PC or on a phone and basically just captures every bit of information that's flowing in hopes of gathering email addresses, looking around, trying to search for any kind of data that can be used and or sold. And then, of course, ransomware is the one that we hear about almost on a daily basis that presents a very large threat to anyone with a single computer up to businesses and enterprise with thousands of computers around the world. It is staggering the impact that we have there. Still trying, there we go. So let's talk about first, there's probably over a dozen different attack types that we look at and are challenged as IT providers to address and try to protect against. But for today's conversation, we're going to focus on these 5: credential compromises, drive-by downloads, malware, phishing, spear phishing, and ransomware. So just a kind of a quick overview, the credential compromise is somewhat self-explanatory, where somehow as you're typing your password, that information is captured. That could be going to a website that you feel is a legitimate website, or could possibly be a legitimate website, but the website has been hacked and is basically tapping, digitally wiretapping that screen where you type in your username and password, and it's redirecting that information to a bad actor. You're going to hear me talk a little bit, or actually quite a bit, and make a reference to bad actors. Those are the bad guys. They're the criminals. They're the programmers that are out trying to steal this information. Another attack that is just next to impossible for you to realize that has even happened is drive-by downloads. Interestingly enough, because these guys are so smart, they can create images that within those images actually contain code that downloads malware to your PC. That's kind of scary, isn't it? So imagine that you go to a website and it's got all kinds of great nature pictures, or just really anything that has a lot of media in it. And so when you start to view those with your browser, what happens is your PC uses a program, whether it's Internet Explorer or some way that PC has to translate the zeros and ones that make up that picture and illustrate it on your screen. Well, what they've figured out is that they can embed the malware, the bad software, inside that picture. And so when your PC is rendering that picture on your screen, it's actually installing the bad software or the malware on your PC. And so that's where the term drive-by download happens, is you just unknowingly, just by looking at a picture, can potentially get infected. That's also something that can occur if you're on a website that has a lot of ads and Google ad networks and things like that. I can give you an example that we had a client, and it's been probably, I would say 10 years ago, that had a branch officer who worked in St. Louis, and this is in the banking industry. And we have, of course, in the financial sector, everything is very buttoned down, and there's not a lot of things that can happen. But this gentleman just kept getting infected. And of course, immediately people are thinking that, well, he's probably going to some unauthorized websites. But the reality of it is we had everything locked down, that there was just no way. And after about 3 weeks and 3 separate infections, we narrowed it down and were able to determine that he was actually going to the website St. Louis Today, and he was reading the financial news. Well, that's well within his job description and the things that he does on a daily basis. And we discovered after further research that the St. Louis Today uses Google ad networks, and there was an ad that somehow, because of his demographic, that ad was displaying on his page and kept infecting his computer. As soon as we blocked that website, it all stopped. So we worked with St. Louis Today, and they got with Google, and it was a pretty long, drawn-out thing, but that's just how easily it can happen. So the next one is phishing, which we all hear about, and spear phishing, which is, imagine if you're in a boat, you cast out a wide net, you're kind of fishing. But let's say you're looking for one type of fish, and let's say that You've got a very detailed, I'm looking for trout, and there's a very specific way I'm going to hunt for that trout or fish for that trout. Well, spear fishing is somewhat the same way. I'm going to narrow my search to everybody who's a CEO or has some kind of financial influence within in a target organization, and I'm going to go directly at them. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that happens, because we're seeing quite a bit of that. And of course, ransomware is the most famous one out there today that we hear about, of course, and that's where you download malware. And of course, again, all of the things that we see in the list sometimes just flow down to ransomware, because they'll use a lot of those different compromises to deliver malware to your desktop. And then, of course, that's when things start happening and going bad. So if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know. So who's at risk? Well, a lot of people, we just talked about CEOs and, people with financial abilities or financial access to a company. But if you think about your house, and when you're protecting your house, you lock all your doors, you lock all your windows, you have all these things in place. But then you say, I've got a pet that I like to let in and out of the house, and I really hate to go through and unlock and undo the alarm and everything. So I'm going to set everything up, but I'm going to leave that one door open so it's easy. That's the big key here. Everybody wants easy. But the problem of it is that when you leave one thing open, then everything becomes easy. So, we talk about C-levels of execs, their administrative assistants, the managers, even the staff. So the reality is everyone is at risk. Everyone's busy, and the moment anyone is compromised, then the potential for harm will grow. So I kind of like this. I stole a little bit, but mayhem is out there, and mayhem can be identified as a number of things. We talk about how busy we are. Everybody reflects on their workplace, and probably the first thing you hear, as a common denominator is, "Oh, we're just so busy. We're behind schedule. We've got to get things done, and it's got to be done now." Everything that we do today's world is an immediate society. I want it now. I mean, how many times have you gone to the drive-up window at a fast food restaurant? And I'll admit, I'm one of them that gets a little bit sassy when I'm like, "You mean I got to wait 3 minutes because the fries aren't ready?" And unfortunately, that's just kind of the way we are living today. And so, the workplace is an opportunity for these bad actors. Everybody's under stress to get the job done, getting it under a deadline. What thing probably is overlooked the most in any organization, and not just in terms of technology, but everything that we do, is there's usually very little amount of user training and then accountability. I mean, a lot of times what you find in businesses is that they're going to train you how to use an application, and in terms of accountability, the only time you're held accountable is when you make a mistake, and then rarely do they go back and do more training. Another thing that we see is poor communication. A lot of people don't want to communicate when something happens because they don't want to be blamed. No one wants to get in trouble. No one wants to feel like they've done anything wrong. And when it comes to terms of IT, then it's even more worrisome, because everybody's scared of technology. So they don't want to admit, "Hey, I clicked on this link and I'm kind of thinking maybe it might be bad." We've got to do something to help our users overcome that fear and recognize that, there's a lot of influences working against us. And the only way that we as companies and individuals are going to succeed is if we work as a team to be able to combat this and protect not only the businesses that we work for, but those resources and eventually our job. Because Imagine if your company gets compromised and all your data is encrypted. How long would it take for that data to come back? How long would you be able to have your systems offline before it really starts having a longer-term financial impact on your organization? So a lot of people ask at this point, so how does a compromise happen? We hear all the stories about what the aftermath was, but how do these people get in? And I talked in some generic fashions about drive-by downloads and everything, but I thought I might just give you one quick glimpse at what can happen. So it's really kind of interesting, and a lot of it is social based, in that the main part of it, the first part of it, is actually trying to gather intelligence about what's going on at an organization. Now, this might be on the internet, it might be at a restaurant, it might be a social gathering. I don't know how many times, and I travel, and I will sit at airports or on planes, and I will listen. Well, actually here, I don't intentionally listen, but when you got somebody blabbering next to you, it's kind of hard to ignore it. That, right, Doug? Yeah. But I have sat next to people on airplanes or in airports that are talking way too loud, talking about things that they probably shouldn't be talking about in public. And if you sit and listen long enough, you can probably have a pretty good picture of ways that you could probably hack them. I sat down at a restaurant, or actually I was standing in line to order a meal at McAllister's in Jefferson City, and there were 4 ladies in front of me. Obviously, they were medical professionals from one of the hospitals. They had their badges on, wearing their smocks, and they were going into great detail about a patient that they were caring for. They mentioned the patient's first name, talked a lot. Then they said something more about his condition, and then they said something about his wife's name, or they said the wife's name and everything. And I'm thinking to myself, I've probably got enough information that I could call that hospital and pretend to be a relative, talk about the wife, and ask more information. And that's exactly how a lot of these criminals work. And we don't think about that in our little pocket of the world here in mid-Missouri, but it does happen, and that's how this works. They also do it digitally, too. We're going to talk about social networks and how some of those are exploited. But once they've gathered that intelligence, then the next thing they do is they start trying to penetrate and get in and find a point of entry in your business. That could be phone calls. That could be emails. I mean, we talk a lot, especially with new customers that we bring on that aren't necessarily familiar with our staff, that if they ever get contacted by someone saying they're from Lam Tech and they feel a little bit uncomfortable for it, we highly encourage them to come up with a reason to say, can I call you back and let me have your name, and then call us back and ask for that person and make sure we're really who we are. A great story that I use quite often is one of our techs that I think a few of you folks know. His name is Eric. Eric is German, and 100% German, and he's not lost that deep accent at all. And he called one of our clients users and proceeded to say, hey, I'm needing to get on your machine. I mean, just exactly like you would envision somebody from pretending to be from Microsoft that's going to help you out. And so this user was kind of comical because he just hung up on Eric. And then the user called his boss and said, hey, I just had this guy call, and he described him. And of course, fortunately, the boss knew Eric and burst out laughing and said, it's okay, call back and get back on the phone with him. But those are the kinds of things that we have to do to encourage our staff to do that. It may take a little extra time, but it is certainly worth it. So when we have all of these things going on and they get a data point of entry, now the next thing that happens is they're on the system. Then they have software that they have put somewhere on a PC or something. And then the third thing that happens is number 3, that CNC communication, that's called command and control. What happens there is once that malware is on there, it turns around and phones back to the criminal and says, I'm here, you have control over me, do what you want. So then at that point in time, they have lateral movement, they can go across all your resources. They're looking, they're trying to discover, what do I have? What do I have access to? And once I find some things that I think are valuable, I'm going to exfiltrate that data. I'm going to export it. I'm going to steal it. I'm going to bring it right out the door through that little digital pipe, and they have your data. The other thing that they can do, and we're finding out more, is what they're doing is they're taking that data, then they're encrypting your data that's left, and then part of now the ransomware is they're threatening that if you don't pay the money to unencrypt it, they're going to sell the data. So it gets really complicated to fight this and combat it. I don't know if you've realized this, but the one key element that seems to be in every one of these slides are users. They're people. We've not talked about tools. We've not talked about anything else other than people. And so that's really the story for today, is that we need to figure out how to help them. To further substantiate that, 80% of hacking-related breaches are leveraging stolen passwords, weak passwords, or human activities that ultimately lead to this being a problem. So, how do they attack? Well, the first thing that they do is they're going to try to spoof. They're going to pretend to be someone they're not, just like Eric. When he called, everybody thought he was trying to break in. But another thing that they do, and it's interesting, notice when you search websites for even people that you do business with, and you get on their website, and usually you can go to the About Us, and you can see our staff or leadership or however it's termed, but we're all proud of the people who work with us, our teammates. And 9 times, I don't know if it's 9 times out of 10, but it seems like every time I look at a website, they've always got that roster of people there, and they have them with their email addresses right front and center. That's prime targets for criminals to mine that information. There's even automation that they use to just crawl websites to look for anything that's an email address and put that in a list. So they find these things that are public, they crawl the internet looking for them, and they turn right around and they use that information to send emails right back to your employees pretending to be someone else. Don't let that be the thing that it should be like the most present on your mind, but there's also people who can now impersonate caller IDs. This has been a massive issue that the FTC has been fighting about. But even the old school, just people calling, saying they're with the IRS, the U.S. mail, those are still prevalent, but it's so much cheaper to send out 10,000 emails than to make all of these phone calls. These people are efficient, and if you send out 10,000 emails and you get 2% people respond, run those numbers. So the reason it's prevalent is they're trying to bait you into typing your credentials. They send you links. In 2018, the most I've highlighted on the left, the most prevalent or the most used impersonated brands are like DocuSign, Office 365, OneDrive, Google, Dropbox. You can see the list, and you can probably say, I use that, I use that, I use that. And the point being is that it's easy to determine just based on how big a company is and how popular its use is, that chances are, I bet you probably can't name 2 or 3 people that don't have Amazon accounts. And so obviously Amazon is a big brand that you see emails come from, especially in the holidays, trying to trick you into doing things. Interestingly enough, the most successful one that people bid on, and actually still do today to a certain point, is the generic invoice. Everybody likes to pay their bills. No one wants to think that they've got a bill out there hanging that they've missed, and they really don't want to get their credit messed up. So initially, they're going to jump right into, oh, what is this bill that I supposedly own, and I'm gonna try to fix it. And the next thing you know, they've been spoofed and they've been phished. So again, people say, well, why in the world does anybody care about my passwords? Well, again, it boils down to money. You know, there's and some people have heard of something called the dark web, but there's a whole other layer on the internet that if you're tech savvy, or you just know how to download the software that opens up these other areas, that it's almost a clearinghouse for criminals. They're taking and gathering all of these different bits of data points, and they're selling them. They're because with those usernames and passwords, how many websites do you visit where you log in that rely on your user or your email address as your username? So there's a lot of value in these, and they can be grabbed and hacked in so many different ways. You know, credit card companies will use email and text to alert you to fraud, but they want you to call them. So if you get an email from you know, your credit card company saying, hey, we've seen an attempt, click here, it's probably going to be bad. So they're really trying to focus on things like that. You know, the questionable links that I'm talking about, IRS, collections, credit card companies, shipping information. We have some companies, and we highly encourage our clients to do this. It's a two-pronged thing. One, we almost insist that that we're allowed to encourage their users to not use their company email address for Amazon or for any of their online shopping. And then as a secondary measure, allowing us to block Amazon.com from their website, or excuse me, from their network. What that allows us to do is, if you do get an email from Amazon, but we know we've blocked that domain, then it's probably bad. And you know, during the holiday seasons, it used to be, you know, that was huge. But everybody, I mean, most people will use Amazon year-round. They may increase their use during the holiday seasons, but you know, there's birthdays and anything else imaginable that you can use it for. So we're very, very strict on doing that. One thing that we always try to encourage our users that we support is not to email anything with date of birth, social security numbers, or what we refer to as PII, which is personally identified information, because chances are it's not going to be used for anything good. So I'm going to take a break here and take a breath. If you have some questions, post them up to Pete, and let's see what you got. Looks like, what do we have there? Looks like I got something blinking. Nope. All right. So to give you an idea, if you haven't seen any of these questionable links, let me point out a few of them that we have. Maybe I will. So this looks pretty serious. You know, we got to have a response. It's required. PayPal says, you know, we've got to have your help resolving this account. But if you'll notice, I don't know if my pointer goes up here, but if you'll notice, this has come from Outlook.com. You're not going to see something from PayPal from Outlook.com. We'll want people to hover over things, but this is the first place that we want to encourage your users to look. we're going to be describing something that I kind of came up with called muscle memory, but it has to do with being able to look at some of these. Here's another one, and it happens to be Outlook.com as well, but it's from Microsoft this time. And so immediately we get a little bit panicky because guess what? Now it says that somebody tried to sign in from Nigeria. Well, we figure it's probably that Nigerian prince, and he's going to want to, give us some money. But again, people will be busy. They'll be in a hurry. They'll see hundreds, if not thousands, of emails in their inbox, and they're going to start clicking through. They're going, well, I just wonder what it is. I'll click here really quick. And when you click here, that's when things are probably going to start going south. So I'm going to tell you, it happens to everyone. So this is a true story, and we've got a new gentleman. He's actually not new anymore, but this story, I just can't stop telling it. Alex is our new service manager, been with us just over a year now. And as I said earlier, I travel a lot. And so Alex received this email from me, and basic, urgent request. Let me know when you're available. I need you to do something for me. And so I'm limited in phone calls. So tell you what, I just need you to help me out. Email me when you get back. So if you'll notice, that came in at 1:51 p.m. So almost immediately, Alex replies back, can do what you need. And this is exactly how Alex would respond too, because Alex is a real go-getter. This was in April of last year, so he'd probably been with us for about 6 months, and he was eager to make sure that he did everything I asked him to do. So then I respond back, hey, great, having a busy day, looking forward to surprise some of the gifts staff with gift cards. You can read it. You can see what the damage is about to be here. You need to get the physical card, scratch the card, take a picture of this whole big long thing. But the thing to make note of is, don't forget, it's a surprise. How soon can you get this done? So what these guys do, these criminals do, is they prey on a staffer's or an employee or whoever, their desire to please whoever it is they think they're responding to. They're going to do it fast, and then they're going to read and say, hey, it's a surprise. So if it's a surprise, I probably shouldn't tell anybody, and I'm going to get it done pretty fast. Well, fortunately, it stopped there because 2 reasons. One, we do internal exercises, and Alex, finally, it all added up, and he said, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. And then the second thing, which would have been our second stopgap, which is great for general accounting practices, Alex doesn't have a company credit card. So he would have had to gone to our bookkeeper. 16 minutes is all it would have taken for him to go and get $1,000 worth of credit cards and send those back to me. But fortunately, he wasn't able to do it. So I can tell you, I shared this story with other people in my travels. And it's interesting to know, I think I've had probably 5 or 6 people in my little circle of friends that have had this occur. And in fact, one of the consultants that we use, his daughter, who was a new intern, who had gone to work for a company as an intern, had access to a company credit card and did in fact fall for this. So it can happen to anyone, and I should also give you some background. Alex is not fresh off the block. Alex is recently out of the Air Force. He commanded drone squadrons and was very detail oriented and very precision driven. And fortunately, we had given him some training that stuck, and he was able to resist the urge and stop and ask, "Is this for real?" So some key points to take away. Notice here we say external. That's something that we have implemented in our email system, that any email that comes in, whether it says Robert Lamb or Joe Jones, is going to be identified as something that originated external to our network. because this is where they try to trick people. Hey, it's from Robert Lamb. He's the owner of the company. Yep, I'm going to take care of it. That's just in case they didn't notice that this came from Vivaldi.net. But the fact that he replied and then the scammer replied back shows you that that is a working email address. And in fact, Vivaldi.net, I believe, is located, it's either in the Ukraine or somewhere in the Eastern Bloc. And further research tells us that they're under a lot of global security because they cater to bad guys. And they have no rules. They don't care. They just sell space on email. So little bitty Missouri, and we're getting attacked by people who are around the globe. So it happens, folks. So what can we do? Well, user awareness training. I know I sound like a broken record, but this is where it all begins. We decided that we were going to eat our own dog food, if you will. We do a lot of training with our guys. And of course they experience from working with our clients, but technical people are the worst people because we think we know it all. And so we have to exercise ourselves as well. We also test our people, and we test clients that are now subscribing to this new service, that we will send out phishing emails and evaluate how your folks respond. And then we turn around and we build a plan to try to help correct that behavior and change the way that they operate in an email environment. Also, as part of most services today, you have spam filtering and URL rewrite, which basically if you have a link, it checks the link before you click it. And then attachment sandboxing, which if you get that invoice.pdf, that it's parked somewhere for somebody to review it that won't harm your network, and then releases it if it's approved. We only allow email attachments containing trusted file types, but everybody trusts a PDF attachment. So where's the balance? And so that's what the difficult question today is how do you find balance in being able to work productively, efficiently, and effectively while still restricting and avoiding these types of attacks. Enabling spoof protection is another thing that you can do. That's kind of refers back to where you saw external in that subject line. Is one, we're warning people that the email didn't come from within our network, even though it did say that I was the user. Two more things, and these are two newer methods of technology that are they're growing in maturity. Is dark web monitoring. You know, it's hard to know if your credentials have been hacked until after it happens. There are now services that are running all the time that do nothing but crawl around in that dark web looking for those clearinghouses that are searching for your credentials. And then once those are found, then we're notified, and then we create tickets, and then we assess those. Some of these are, you know, email and passwords that are 6, 7 years old, and we call a user and they say, oh, no, we haven't used that forever. But then you might find, we've had a couple times where we've called the client and said, hey, is this your password? And they're just like this silence, and they're going, yeah, that is my password. And well, we just discovered it yesterday. So sometimes this happens very quickly. And again, if you're being spearphished and people are watching your activity, they will know where they can use those usernames and passwords to do the most damage and get the most money. So the final thing that is another trend that we're seeing is what's called fileless threats. So the fileless threat is partially these drive-by downloads where you will go and you will visit a website, and this code is sitting in memory of your computer, but it hasn't really written a file anywhere, but it just sits out there. And we're seeing and reading reports that sometimes these fileless threats will remain in the memory of your PC for months on end. Once they do finally put something, a file, or write something to your computer, those might also sit there. If you've ever watched any of these spy and terrorism shows where they talk about sleeper cells, well, these are like sleeper threats. Some of the sleeper threats now are sitting out for as long as, I think the last one, I think I have a slide that says about 46 days or something to that nature. So it can be very disconcerting as a user or as an owner of a company that says, how do I, what can I do to protect? And it's just multiple layers of security and training that's going to help you avoid this. Because again, the human factor is key. 76% of the people use the same password for most, if not all, websites. So think about that for a minute. Look at how you do today. And I used to have the same password with just a few variants, because why? I had so many passwords that it was hard to remember them. And of course, then everybody tells you, well, don't write your password down. So there's got to be ways to manage this. There can be personal password managers. There can be a myriad of things that you can do. But if you look at how many different apps that people may use, and I'm not sure who created this, but Pornhub and Ashley Madison, I don't know how those got in there. Doug, did you make this one?
No, I did
okay.
not.
But this just shows you, and I think the reason these are up here is that some of these places like Ashley Madison and Tinder and some of those are places that have been hacked. So there's probably a chance that a good portion of those have been hacked. So then what do? Well, we talk about strong passwords, and you will still find websites that won't let you use passwords other than just saying, hey, you have to have a capital letter, a special character, and a numeric character. Some won't even let you do that. And I just, it's so disappointing to see popular websites that still don't allow you to put in long phrases, passwords with spaces and things like that. They're a little bit easier to remember, and this is what we're encouraging our users to do, having more memorable and secure ones. I like Hawaii better than Four Seasons, but if there's a zero in there, it'll take password cracking software a long time to crack something like that, other than like a single word with a few characters changed up in it. Interestingly enough, the most popular password out there is the capital P @SSWZORD. So let's not use that one. Let's not use the modifications by putting a 1 or a 2. How many of us have had a password like that, and when we're forced to choose a new password, we think we're going to be pretty smart. We're going to add a 1 on there, and it makes us feel good. But the reality of it is that we've just created more issues. So Pete, I'm double checking. It doesn't look like we've got any questions so far. So I'm going to continue because we are wrapping down to the tail end of our discussion. But just a few more things to reiterate. When we are looking at some of these ways that we're getting hacked, interestingly enough, recent survey, I guess in 2019, Q1 2019, so a year ago, 50% of the email subjects that led to phishing was from LinkedIn. We're all encouraged as business owners to get on LinkedIn, promote our business, get followers, on and on and on, because that's how we're going to get new business. And then, of course, what does LinkedIn do? They send out a nice little email every once in a while. Hey, people are looking at your profile, or you've got a new message, or hey, join my network. You've got invitations waiting. I will refer you back to one of the early slides. It says, everybody is in a world of immediacy. We want to do it now. So immediately, we don't want that person to think we're ignoring them or, hey, who's looking at me? I'm going to click on the view. And then the next thing you know, it's going to say, hey, you need to log into LinkedIn so we can see who your views are. So then you log in with what? Your business email address. And since 70% of those people use the same password, the probability is now they can hack into other things that you have. Facebook, again, your password has been reset. We're so tuned in to making sure that we're safe because we're using the same password that if you get an email saying that your password is successfully reset, you don't remember changing that, well, click here. Well, there you go. They're going to trick you into finding out who mysteriously changed your password. So they just prey on human nature, and you think you're doing the right thing, but then when you go do it, you've made a mistake. So social media is hazardous. So as I said earlier with my example with Alex, I was out of town. How many of you post on your Facebook page that I'm on vacation or I'm leaving to go on vacation, or posting pictures of you sitting in your beach chair with your toes facing to the water, and there's a picture and you're bragging to your friends, hey, guess where I am? It's warm here and cold there. Well, if your profile is not really restricted and pictures like that happen to be on the open market, then people can see that you're out of town. They also can try to be fake friends, and they can call and say, hey, Doug, I understand that Courtney is out of town and I need to do something. I need to access whatever. They can actually trick people into giving up more information. Watering hole attacks are another favorite, where they lurk around where people are working, and then they try to gather data there. How many of you have seen a couple of posts that always kind of make me crack up? The one where you post, hey, my Facebook account has been hacked. Don't respond to any friend requests that I make. Another real popular one is hey, let's have fun, get to know each other. And here are 10 questions, answer them and share them with your answers, and then somebody else will do the same thing. What high school did you go to? What states have you visited? All of this data is collected. And the interesting part, which is why Facebook is falling under so much scrutiny, a lot of this stuff is so fake because it's being used by hackers. They can gather and they can take data points and align them and build enormous amounts of background information on a user by connecting all the dots. Then they turn around and they use that against you. The other thing is data breaches. I mean, how many times have we seen Equifax and any number of large companies that have announced they've had a data breach? Some of those announcements come almost a year after the breach has occurred. Can you imagine how much data and how much damage has been done to your account by the use of the data that's been stolen? So you need to take those really serious when those happen, which again is another perfect reason why you want to make sure that you have different passwords everywhere and they're complicated. Folks, it's an endless cycle. You get breached, then they spoof you, then they phish you, they give you bad links, then they use those stolen credentials, they breach you again, and it's just on and on and on. And so, no one is immune from this. We have companies that have 2 or 3 users that are constantly getting attacked, getting bogus emails. Everybody has a potential there for having these issues. So we get to the point now where people are saying, well, what do we do? Well, this is where we come in, and I will come back and talk once again about I just lost my keyboard again. There we go. Muscle memory. So 91% of successful breaches start with spear phishing. And even if you have the best anti-spam filters in the world, we still see these. They're crafted very well, and they can get through. 30% of these breaches are caused by repeat offenders. We do sometimes where we will test a client's users. We will send out these phishing expeditions, and maybe we get 10% people who fail the test and click through. It's a multi-stage process. Sometimes we'll just get them to click the link, and then they'll realize, whoops, I shouldn't have done it. Then we'll get a smaller portion that even goes so far as to click on the login here to check or reset your password, and that happens. I will tell you, it happens to everyone. We actually tricked one of our senior tech into going in and changing his Microsoft identity, and as soon as he clicked OK, he realized we had trapped him, and he was pretty embarrassed about it. So and the thing of it is, it's not really a shame thing. I think it needs to be looked at upon as awareness, but people need to start creating these habits, this muscle memory. And when I talk about muscle memory, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Most of us, we drive to work every day. Pretty much take the same route, right? I've been driving to our office here at Lam Tech at this location since 2011. Don't want to try to do the math because then all of a sudden I start showing how old we are. But since 2011, I've been driving to our office. I have found sometimes I'll drive to town on a Saturday and going to go across town, and the next thing you know, I happen to be in our parking lot. Now, my wife assures me I shouldn't seek help for this. I'm going to call this muscle memory because I'm thinking about what am I going to do, what am I going to buy when I get to Menards or wherever it was I was going, but my muscle memory is taking me to the place I drive 5 days a week. So what we need to do is we need to incorporate a change in the behavior that we have with our users, that whenever they open up an email, instinctively they know to look and stop and read and not click on things that don't fully meet all the criteria. There's the general things like, we don't want anybody sharing and using USB keys and things like that. We want people to lock their machines, their PCs, their laptops, their phones when they walk away from them. All of the usual things, the stuff that we talk to everybody about every day. But there has to be a way that we exercise our people so they do not make these mistakes, because all it takes is one click and it can just simply be disastrous. And not just for the company, but for your people themselves. And that's the thing that I try to impress when we talk to users, is that yes, the company, your company that you're employed by has brought us in to do this training and do these exercises, but these are the same practices you need to use at home, because you don't want your personal bank account, your personal retirement funds drained because you've used the same password and bad practices. And that's where we really try to focus. And people say, well, what is important to the hackers? Well, there's really 4 areas. They want your financial information, your personal information, your identity, and one that people don't think about is your contacts. Because if you have 20 friends and you email them a lot and you guys trust each other and, hey, we're always keeping in touch, and then a hacker gets a hold of my contacts and starts sending my 20 friends bad information, and it looks like it comes from me, now all of a sudden that 20, and then those 20 if they have 20. So you see where I'm going? So that's why this is so important. And see, Pete's needs to do some things now, but we're going to postpone that. So that's why it's so important that we protect it all. And the base part of it is protecting our identity, because you can buy these lists just like on an eBay shopping place for as little as $2 a piece. And then if you figure you buy 10,000 and you get 2% response on each one of those responses, you can steal $1,000 from. That's why people do this. So what we're going to wrap up, because I know we're running a little bit over, is we want to build a culture of awareness with your employees. You know, it's interesting to know that, you know, all the statistics show that everything starts with your users, but 90% of the successful hacks come from phishing, yet no one wants to train on that. And training costs a little bit of time. It's not expensive, but it's something that has to happen on a repetitive basis. We just can't do a one and done, because for one, this stuff changes. And so, you know, here's my pitch for you. Here's what I want you to think about. Remember back when everybody used tape backups, and that was the de facto, boy, we're using tape backups. There were people who weren't using any tape backups at all, but most businesses incorporated the use of tape backup. Then you change. Why did you change? Because data capacities grew. We were collecting more and more data, and we were using it to grow our business. It gave us such trending information so we could make business decisions. It wasn't just anymore how much inventory do I have on hand or what's our financial position, but it was his history. It was trends. It also was, you could have data that controls elevators and all kinds of logic controls within your business. The concern of data loss, and more importantly, how long it would take to recover from data loss, became such a focus that people started realizing that they needed to invest in better technology. And so that's why today you rarely see anyone using a tape drive, and instead they rely heavily on local appliances that replicate data to at least one or two offsite facilities. As a service provider, we rarely will engage a client that does not send their data offsite, because we feel like it's just an accident waiting to happen. We feel like there's no way for us to be able to look confidently in that client's eyes and say, sure, something happens, we can recover your data. And today it's the norm. You know, if you want to make it an even a more trip back in time, remember when we were kids and we used to ride around in cars and trucks and no seatbelts? All of a sudden, now you get a ticket for not wearing one. And why? It's because statistically it's proven that seatbelts either save lives or reduces the chance of fatalities. And that's why it's become a law. Now, I'm not saying cybersecurity training is going to become a law, but we're seeing so much damage and destruction to businesses because people are untrained. They're not able to monitor. They're not managing what's going on. You know, everybody has so much work to do that they don't feel like they can take on such an arduous and administratively burdensome task of doing that. And the reality of it is there's no one single bullet to combat the threat. It's layers of security. It has always been firewalls, content filtering access based on if somebody was outside the country and we said, nope, they can't touch our network. We use antivirus, anti-malware, spam filtering, email filtering. The list just goes on. But the problem of it is it's just not enough. And so in seeing and identifying all the things that we've talked about this morning, the biggest threat today is users and their lack of muscle memory. You know, how do you build muscles? You work out. You know, we talk about eating healthy. We do that because we want to be healthier. We eat right, we exercise, and we manage our environment. How often do you change your air filters in your furnace? Well, why do you do that? Well, I used to just change mine because my wife used to scream at me about the house being dusty and I haven't changed the filters out. But now we learn more about particulates in the air that cause health problems. Flu viruses. I don't even want to talk about coronavirus. That's not the pitch today. But you know, the germs are in the air, and so you see people that are using like black light and ultraviolet lights in their filtering systems. Again, it's identifying a threat and using technology to minimize it. So what I'm going to challenge you with today is think about what can you do as far as training people and preventing and being proactive on getting ahead of this. So our thought is, and our suggestion is, you positioning and leveraging new tools and processes. Again, we need all of the tools we're using today, but we've got to start using some of these newer tools that are out there for monitoring breaches and stolen credentials. You don't know you have a problem until the event has happened. We have a way of attempting to get ahead of it. It certainly isn't perfect, but anything that can help us give a heads up and work on it is what we are trying to do. The real-time monitoring of fileless threats, as I mentioned earlier, some of these threats will sit dormant for 43 days before it actually attacks. That's a pretty scary thing to think about. And if you've got some tools and ways of looking for those threats that are sitting out there before they actually activate, it is certainly something worth considering. So that brings us up to the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm not going to go anywhere. If you would like to put some up, I'll be happy to try to answer those. If you have some questions or want to talk to us more about your specific environment, please give Doug a call or email him, and we'll be happy to visit with you. Existing clients, you guys know who to call and what to ask. So we're here for you, and we thank you very much for your time. Pete, back to you. Or is it back to Doug? Pardon me.
It's all right. All good. We do appreciate your time, though, Rob, here this morning, as well as everybody that is listening in here as well. We also want to thank Tech Data for sponsoring our webcast. And as Rob just said, if you're a current client and you want to see what you learned pertains to your agreement and how it pertains to your agreement, feel free to give us a call after the webinar. And if you're wanting to learn more about LambTech in general, as well as our offerings where we can go in depth on everything that we talked about today, give us a call at 660-851-7342. That's my direct number. And also learn even more at lamtech.com. So again, we do appreciate your time, and hope you have a fantastic day, and we'll send it back to Pete.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, again, on behalf of LambTech and Tech Data. Rob, appreciate it. That was very insightful, and we should go here. Somebody wrote, Rob, before we go, there is a question. It said, sorry, I had a little emergency interruption. Are you saying there's a specific item we can install to stop this? I'm not sure if that's ransomware, malware, or whatever. Do you want to touch on that real quick?
Sure. There's 1,000 tools that people sell, and we have our own tool set that we utilize. It's actually part of our services that we do, or that we provide, and essentially the one that we're referring to as part of our software tools that we use that searches through that fileless memory, and it looks for a lack of better word, a signature or a unique identifier that this is a known bad problem, or it's one that we identify that that shouldn't be there. When that occurs, then our ticketing system creates a ticket, and our dispatcher then assigns it to a technician to go in and investigate and remove it. So I can't tell you like specific products, Michelle, that would be a specific. I mean, there's really not a lot you can go out and buy off the shelf. They're typically incorporated into security stacks and security services that companies like ours provide.
Great. Okay, so that's it. We're going to wrap it up. Again, thanks everybody for joining us, and have a great afternoon. Bye now.
All right. Thank you, Pete.